Welcome back to another Reading and Correcting with me, Kindar, the Tiger Writes, and Ty, the Tiger Supervisor. These are where I read a chapter from one of my stories and correct it as I go. If you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch and YouTube. And if you are looking to support me, that is on my Patreon. Today, we are doing chapter 54 of The Technician's Fight. Jeremy brought up, okay, that's, brought, ah, Jeremy brought up the circuit design and inserted it into the reactor floating over his drafting table. It was a scaled down version of what it would be if he were to have it built. Not that he knew if it would work. This was a new design, taking his last reactor and applying Kelsirian's thought process to it. The theoretical result his table gave him said he'd reduce the heat output by 17% simply by increasing its volume threefold. His biggest issue was that he kept filling that extra space with more components, which increased the power output and the heat generated. It was what he had led him to design his own circuit, larger than needed to visually fill the space and keep him from adding to it. What he now had was half the size of Alex's reactor, but had an output of 9% higher. But okay, I've got two buts here. With now, what he now had was half the size of Alex's reactor with an output of 9% higher, but generated far too much heat. The extrapolation model to reduce the heat to something that could be uncomfortably survive while keeping the same power generated placed the resulting reactor at 138% larger than the ship's reactor. It looked like a sacrifice was inevitable. Power, heat generated, or size. He started the design, then erased the work area. Unless he had a breakthrough somewhere. Started by designing a new circuit. When in doubt, forget everything and start fresh. So, Bob said, his odd voice still bothering Jeremy. You want to know how I was trained? Let's start by establishing that after the mess they made of my mind, I don't know how reliable what I remember is. I have cross-referenced as much as I could using the attached movies, so you can see dramatized version of what it might have been like. I was infantry, so no fancy resist mind games training for me. No, we had, no, it's just, you know what? They have. I know they have divisions who got the special mission, and I've attached movies about those people, but again, it'll be dramatizations. The way I remember it, my training was about hardening my body and my will. They had us train in the worst condition you can think of. Storms, tight places, desert, hot, cold, wet, way too dry, can barely breathe. If there was a way to create discomfort, we had to train through it. Means that what I remember of my deployment went as well as those things do. I think one was aboard a cruiser that had been taken over by some liberation group, miners, really. Miners, I think, really hazy. But the fighting was through narrow corridors. Training paid off. Had to take on terrorists on a planet in the middle of a monsoon, if I remember that one right. Can't tell you what their deal was or who we were defending. I remember being wet all the way to my marrow. I think that was my last deployment before being assigned on to Washington. Regarding my contract, yeah, for a bit there, it looked iffy. Turns out that even people for whom the contract is everything, emotions get in the way. New hire ingratiated herself with the captain and tried to convince her I was bad for business. More of the crew sided with her than anyone expected, but in the end, my performance reviews spoke for themselves and short of pissing off everyone. Uh, okay, there's missing something here. Short of pissing off everyone, that's what the captain cares about. Oh, okay. Short of pissing off everyone, that's what the captain cares about. There was a lot of shuffling at the next station. A few saw their contracts terminated early for working against the ship's interest. We lost two good workers who I thought were friends of mine. I guess you do never really know people, even if you're sleeping with them. I'm glad your crew's good to you, although what you described of your training terrifies me. I think that back in my military day, that would have qualified as torture. You sound like you're pulling through, so go you. Oh, after your message, I want my captain not to get on your ship's bad side, because I don't want to have to face you in a fight. Did you know there are movies, well, that what Kelsirians called ballads about your ship and your captain? Is is he really some god-chosen super Kelsirians or something? I mean, I know they're movies, but they have to be based on something, right? The Kelsirian on the screen was a good representation of his heart. Jeremy had to admit that, if he allowed for the extra height and muscle. Really? He asked Growl. That's an actual Kelsirian actor, not a visual creation? The male on the screen roared as he grabbed a Tahornian by the neck in each hand and raised them. I hope he was altered for the role. Growl answered, wincing as the male made demands and threats to be told where the stolen goods were, because that kind of muscle mass can't be healthy. That isn't how it happened, he snapped as the male threw one hard enough. The window shattered. I had 4 packs with me. It was supposed to be a peaceful surrender, and we were all armored. Tahornian claws are vicious, jagged. They get under your flesh and they will rip as they pull through. You get nasty scars from them, and some pirates are known to dip them in poison before battle. Only an idiot goes into battle wearing only pants. He yelled at the scream and mumbled, I hate those things. Why are they made then? Because there's a market for ballads about the real hunts. Hunters perform. Wait, really? They claim that's real? They don't have access to the reports, just the stories that circulate, and they aren't made by official ballad makers. Those know they aren't allowed to produce real stories about us. Although some of their just fictitious ballads were close enough to actual event, they have been brought before adjudication and lost some of those cases. So these are what? Amateur works? Growl nodded. Jimmy whistled. You have to respect the work that went into making those, then. How much of the surroundings are digitally added, do you think? None, I expect. A shuttle to one of the station orbiting Kelser is cheap, and there are plenty of deserted area. It doesn't take much to make something like that look like a ship, although the corridors are too large for a Tahornian ship. They aren't as bad as Earthers, but smaller than I like. If ballads about hunters aren't allowed, why aren't these stopped? Growl shrugged. That's for the adjudicator to decide. The little I know is from the ship's accountant. He did a tally of those about me and pointed out the kind of money they generated. I asked how I could go that could go unchallenged, and he explained about black economy and alley dealings. I stopped listening after 5 minutes. He was still explaining how the hard currency made tracking sales impossible. Can't you take actions directly? Jimmy motioned to the screen where Growl looked alike. Well, Growl's, that would be Growl's look-alike, had somehow lost his pants while fighting a Shimbarian. That's pretty disparaging. He grinned. He's nowhere near as well endowed as you. I'll stop the ballad with a few taps and with a few taps brought it back to the beginning, where after the title of The Hunt for the Tohordian Thieves, he paused on a message Jeremy hadn't noticed. He read it, then laughed. You guys have those none of the events or people in the movie are real disclaimer? You guys also. Okay. If they didn't do that, every hunter who has been depicted could take action, and some aren't content letting adjudicators deal with this kind of depiction. Then why aren't the studios that officially produce ballads doing the same thing? Because they're too big to convince anyone the reports they recreate were anything but accurate. So such disclaimers become an act of bad faith, and those went before adjudicators centuries ago. There are too many things wrong in that for anyone to believe it's really what's happened, even if that's the story those who enjoy watching them tell themselves. Those are what people who enjoy the hunters think they'll experience. They're why the leadership is complaining about getting our rejects. Then why aren't they doing something about them? You'd have to ask Tom. I'm missing a no in here. And he'd have to ask someone he knows in the back rooms. I figure. Growl nuzzled him. Please tell me you've seen enough. I don't think I can take any more abuse. Jared grinned. I don't know. He was naked, and I would like to see what they have him do as a celebration. Growl snorted, then was on top of Jerry. Oh, I can show you how I celebrate a victorious hunt. The female came at him, and he blocked, grabbing her arm, unbalancing her and shoving her away in time to turn and step out of the way of the clawless swipe. The man threw himself back before Jimmy grabbed the wrist. He pivoted and blocked the punch, stepped in and tripped that male. A weight landed on his back, and he was off as he fell, the female landing as he rolled to his feet, blocking her kick, then sweeping her legs out from under her. He turned in place to keep his attacker in sight, having to glance left and right to keep in on top of that. He turned in place to keep his attacker in sight, having to glance left and right on top of that, trying to gauge out of the corner of his eye who was feinting an attack and who planned to carry it through. He fell for the feint this time and didn't move and didn't avoid the punch in his stomach. He pushed the pain down and shouldered the female as hard as he could, sending her off her feet. Then he blocked a kick and a punch connected with his shoulder. A foot at the back of his knee had him down on one. Then he was keeping an arm in front of his face and doing the best to keep hits from connecting until he finally raised it and made a fist. They stepped away from him, and after catching his breath, he stood. Good. That was good. You've noticed that those of you who were able to dart in and out lasted longer and were more of a nuisance to me, slowly exhausting me. When taking on an Earther, coordination is important. You can't let me rest, but you can't get in the way of each other. The pride on their face would get the teens reprimanded if they were hunters. Pride got hunters killed. But for a group exercising, pitting themselves against the ship's hunter-trained Earther, it was deserved, especially considering how easily he'd controlled the fight their first time. Training cubs hadn't worked. Jeremy wasn't much of an instructor. Telling someone how to fight was harder than simply letting them come at him so he could show them what they did wrong. Cubs hadn't learned enough to be able to absorb those kind of lessons. So Thur had transitioned him to teens, and it had gone better. Taking each group of disorganized fighter, he quickly tired out to keep... Okay. Taking each group of disorganized fighter, they quickly tired out to keep him off balance while okay, that doesn't work. Each group from this organized fighters who quickly tired out trying to keep him off balance teams to teams who learned to relieve each other while they ousted him. Learned to relieve each other while they exhausted him. He sent them to the showers, and adults stepped forward. He smirked. Really? After they softened me up is when you lot decide to take me on? Throws looked at the rest of the pack. Does a hunter who can't take on a fight after barely out of does a hunter who can't take on a fight after oh wow. This is does a hunter it might be simple who does a hunter deserve to be in our pack? If all he did after all he did was have a play fight with barely out of their cubhood children. That's over here. All they did was have a play fight with barely out of their cubhood children. Jimmy raised an eyebrow. Well, is that how you got the male to agree to this? So I'd give them the pounding they deserve? Scaram returned a smirk. We've watched you males. It's a fun show no matter who pounds into whom. Jimmy raised his fist. For the record, there's a leisure alley right outside the gym. It would be way simpler to just head there. But nowhere near as fun as first fighting you, Hurum said, then rushed him. Jeremy sighed, enjoying the bodies against him, exhausted and sated. He loved his pack. We have a situation here, he hurried to say. I need a power to arcs 13 off now. Technician, the engineer's voice came over his comm. Explain. The printer in the repair base faulted, he replied, cutting through the wall. But the safety circuit didn't blow, so the line's overheating and melting stuff no one wants. One of your prints? Jeremy chuckled, pulling the panel off, then backed from the heat. No, mine's printing fine, although once we cut the power, that's probably going to be ruined. The power has been cut. Jimmy looked up. The lights were off, but the fire behind the wall were still continuing. He cursed. Out! Everyone out! We have a chain reaction. Engineer, repair needs to be sealed and voided. The fire's hot enough, it's feeding off the oxy directly. This is maintenance. We're reading people still there. We're evacuating. What's in place to keep this from spreading to other sections? Bulkheads have been lowered between the section you are in and the adjacent one. Jimmy looked around as he reached for the door. The fire was intense enough that half the bay was illuminated. Tell me I'm the only one left in here. Confirmed. Leaving now. Closing the door. The light over the lock immediately went blue. Okay, blue is a ghost color. So, went red. Then flashed non-breathable. Do not enter. Sensors confirm fire has been starved, the maintenance female said after a minute, reintroducing oxy. No reignition. Good. Unlock the door. Negative. Only safety personnel are allowed until the area has been confirmed secure. I'm technician Jeremy Bradshaw. I have the expertise to look over the damaged part and find out what went wrong. The engineer has confirmed. There was a pause. The engineer has confirmed you are qualified. You can enter. The door opened and he hurried in. No one else tried to rush before it closed. The melted wall still radiated heat all the way to where he stood, so he wouldn't be able to get close for a while, which was fine, because he needed to find the tools that would let him work out what had gone wrong. And that concludes chapter 54 of The Technician's Fight. If you are enjoying this, please leave a like. If you want to know when the next chapter will be up, subscribe and hit the bell. If you want to read this story, it is available on the Ream Story. If you want to listen to this live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch and YouTube. Links are in the notes. And with that, I shall wish you a good day.